the legendary outlaw country star's final chapter revealed through those who knew him best. In April 2016, as the world mourned the loss of one of country music's most authentic voices, the questions began to surface. How did Merle Haggard, the man who defied death so many times before, spend his final moments? What truths remained hidden behind the headlines announcing his passing? And perhaps most hauntingly, what did the Hag, a man who turned his turbulent life into poetry, want us to remember? The answers, it turns out, were kept close by those who loved him most. For years, the Haggard family maintained a dignified silence about those last days, until now. Stay with us as we uncover the untold story of a legend's final chapter, the family revelations that change everything we thought we knew, and the legacy that continues to echo through American music today. Let's dive in. Before we explore those final days that have remained shrouded in privacy, we need to understand why Merle Haggard matters so profoundly in the American musical landscape. This isn't just the story of another country star's passing. It's about the final acts of a man whose life read like the very songs he wrote. Authentic, unapologetic, and deeply human. Born during the Great Depression to parents who fled the Oklahoma Dust Bowl, Merle Ronald Haggard entered the world on April 6, 1937, in a converted boxcar in Oildale, California. His childhood was marked by hardship from the start. When Merle was just 9 years old, his father James died suddenly of a brain hemorrhage, leaving his mother Flossie to raise him and his siblings alone while working as a bookkeeper. The loss of his father sent young Merle spiraling. By his early teens, he was already in trouble with the law, hopping freight trains, committing petty theft, and spending time in juvenile detention centers. "I was raised in a labor camp with people who picked fruit and cotton for a living," Haggard once told an interviewer. "Times were hard. I learned early on what it means to do without." These early experiences would later inform his most powerful songs, the authentic voice of the American working class that couldn't be faked. His troubled youth culminated in a stint at San Quentin prison for attempted burglary, where a pivotal moment occurred that would change the trajectory of his life. In 1958, Haggard was in the audience when Johnny Cash performed his famous prison concert. "I saw Johnny Cash that day, and something clicked," Haggard later recalled. "I knew that's what I wanted to do with my life." But the path forward wasn't simple. After his release in 1960, Merle worked odd jobs while playing in dive bars around Bakersfield, California, developing what would become known as the Bakersfield sound, a rawer, more authentic alternative to the polished Nashville productions of the era. His first legitimate break came in 1962 when he was hired to play bass for Wynn Stewart. Soon after, Haggard scored his first hit with Sing a Sad Song, but it was 1966's Branded Man, a song about the struggles of an ex-convict that marked his true arrival as a singular voice in American music. The song reached #1 on the country charts, the first of an astonishing 38 chart toppers Haggard would achieve throughout his career. What set Haggard apart wasn't just his distinctive voice or masterful guitar playing, it was his unflinching honesty. In an industry increasingly dominated by glitz and glamour, Merle wrote and sang about real life, prison, heartbreak, poverty, and patriotism. Songs like Mama Tried, Okie from Muskogee, and If We Make It Through December became anthems for the forgotten America. But with his rising fame came personal demons that would follow him throughout his life. Here's where the story gets complicated. Merle's meteoric rise through the 1960s and 70s established him as country royalty. But his personal life was often as turbulent as his early years. His first marriage to Leona Hobbs produced 4 children, Dana, Marty, Kelly, and Noel, but ended in divorce in 1964. A series of relationships followed, including marriages to Bonnie Owens, 1965 to 1978, Leona Williams, 1978 to 1983, and Debbie Parrott, 1985 to 1991, before he found lasting love with Teresa Ann Lane in 1993. Teresa, 17 years his junior, would remain by his side until the very end, providing a stability that had eluded Haggard for much of his life. "Teresa saved me," Haggard reportedly told friends. "She gave me a reason to straighten up and face the music." Throughout these years, Merle built an impressive musical legacy, collaborating with artists ranging from George Jones to Willie Nelson. His friendship with Nelson would prove particularly significant. The two legends toured together extensively and recorded the duet album Pancho and Lefty in 1983, creating an enduring partnership that lasted decades. "Merle was like a brother to me," Nelson has said in interviews since Haggard's passing. "We understood each other in ways that maybe nobody else could. We both came up hard and knew what it meant to finally make it." By the 1990s and 2000s, Haggard had attained elder statesman status in country music. He was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1994, received Kennedy Center honors in 2010, and continued recording and performing well into his 70s. His later albums, including 2010's I Am What I Am and 2015's collaborative album with Nelson, Django and Jimmy, showed that his creative powers remained undiminished with age. But behind the accolades and continued success, Haggard's health had begun to decline. A bout with lung cancer in 2008 resulted in the removal of part of his lung. According to family members who have now come forward, this health crisis was a turning point, one that made Merle acutely aware of his mortality. After the cancer, Dad started putting things in order, his son Ben Haggard recently revealed in an exclusive family interview. He became more intentional about his relationships, especially with us kids. There were amends to be made, and he knew it. Yet despite his health challenges, Merle maintained a grueling tour schedule, something his family now suggests was both a blessing and a curse. "Music kept him alive," says daughter Kelly, "but the road was killing him too." But then everything changed. By late 2015, those closest to Merle began noticing troubling signs. The man known for his commanding stage presence and distinctive baritone was increasingly fragile between performances. According to family members, Haggard had been diagnosed with double pneumonia in December 2015, forcing him to cancel several shows, something the fiercely professional performer rarely did. Dad was never one to complain about his health. His son Ben recently told reporters, "But we could all see he was struggling to breathe, even when he was just sitting still." Ben, who had joined his father's band as lead guitarist, had a front row seat to his father's decline, watching from the stage as Merle pushed through performances despite obvious discomfort. The pneumonia would prove persistent, returning several times over the following months. In a decision that has remained controversial within the family until their recent revelations, Merle insisted on continuing to tour despite his doctor's recommendations for extended rest. According to Teresa Haggard, his wife of 23 years, Merle always said he'd rather die on stage than in a hospital bed. He was terrified of becoming irrelevant. This fear of irrelevance, a surprising admission from a man so decorated and revered, speaks volumes about Haggard's complex relationship with his own legacy. As his son Marty recently explained, "Dad came from nothing. He never forgot what it was like to be hungry, to be nobody. I think that stayed with him until the end, this fear that it could all disappear." By March 2016, Haggard's condition had deteriorated significantly. Yet remarkably, he performed his final show on February 29, 2016, at the Mangy Moose in Teton Village, Wyoming. Attendees reported that while his voice remained strong, Haggard performed the entire show seated, a concession the once energetic performer would have found unthinkable in healthier years. Here's where accounts of his final weeks begin to diverge, with family members offering sometimes conflicting interpretations of Merle's state of mind and the decisions made around his care. According to one version, primarily supported by statements from his older children, Haggard had made peace with his impending death and wished to spend his final days at home on his 189-acre ranch in Shasta County, California. "Dad was ready," daughter Kelly recently stated. "He told me, 'I've lived 100 lives in one. I'm good to go whenever the good Lord calls.'" But others close to Merle, including his wife Teresa and younger son, Ben, suggest the situation was more complicated. Merle was a fighter, Teresa has maintained. He never gave up, right until the end. There were treatments we were still considering, clinical trials that offered some hope. These differing perspectives reportedly created tension within the family during Haggard's final days. Tensions that have only recently begun to heal as they've come together to share his story. What is undisputed is that by late March 2016, Haggard had returned to his ranch, surrounded by family as his health continued to fail. His longtime friend and touring partner Willie Nelson, aware of Merle's condition, reportedly called frequently during this period. According to Ben Haggard, the two legends spoke just days before Merle's passing. Willie told Dad he loved him, and Dad said the same back, Ben recently revealed. It was simple, but that was their way. They weren't men of many words when it came to feelings, but there was a deep respect there. As April approached, something remarkable happened, something the family has kept private until now. On his 79th birthday, April 6, 2016, Merle Haggard passed away at his ranch in Northern California, surrounded by family. But what happened in the days immediately preceding his death has remained largely unknown to the public until his family finally broke their silence. According to Teresa Haggard, in an emotional recent interview, Merle experienced what she describes as a moment of perfect clarity, roughly a week before his passing. He called everyone into the room, all the kids, me, even some of the grandchildren, and he spoke to each of us individually, she revealed. It was like he knew exactly how much time he had left and wanted to make sure nothing was left unsaid. This gathering, which the family now refers to simply as the talk, represented a profound break from Merle's typically reserved emotional expression. Ben Haggard described it as the most present I'd ever seen my dad. It was like he wasn't sick at all for those few hours. During these conversations, Merle reportedly addressed old wounds with his older children from his first marriage, acknowledged regrets about his absences during their childhoods, and expressed pride in the adults they had become. With Ben, his youngest son who had followed him into music, Merle was particularly pointed. He told me, "Don't try to be me. Be better than me," Ben recalled, his voice breaking slightly. He said, "I made a lot of mistakes. You don't have to repeat them." Perhaps most surprisingly, Merle also used this time to give explicit instructions about his musical legacy. According to multiple family members, he specified which unreleased recordings should see the light of day and which should remain vaulted. There was material he was proud of and wanted people to hear, Kelly Haggard explained. And then there were songs he felt weren't ready, weren't right. He was curating his own legacy right up to the end. This previously undisclosed deathbed counsel wasn't the only revelation. The family also shared that in his final days, Merle had been writing new material, songs that no one outside the family has yet heard. He couldn't play guitar anymore because his hands were too weak, Teresa said, but he was still writing lyrics, still humming melodies. Creating was as natural to him as breathing. One song in particular, reportedly titled "Goodbye Mama," was completed just days before his passing, a final letter of sorts to his mother Flossie, who had died years earlier. The family has kept this song private, describing it as too personal to share with the world, at least for now. In the final 48 hours, as Merle's condition deteriorated rapidly, the family maintained a constant vigil. According to Ben, his father drifted in and out of consciousness but seemed at peace. "The last coherent thing he said to me was, 'Look after your mama,'" Ben recalled. Classic dad. Practical to the end. When Merle took his final breath shortly after noon on his 79th birthday, the family honored his wishes for simplicity. There was no dramatic hospital scene, no extraordinary measures, just a quiet passing in the home he loved, with those he loved nearby. For a man whose life had contained so much drama, the end came with remarkable gentleness. The news of Merle Haggard's death sent shockwaves through the music world, but the family's decision to keep the details private allowed them to grieve away from the public eye. Now, years later, they feel ready to share these intimate moments, not to exploit Merle's memory, but to complete the picture of a complex man whose public persona only told part of the story. In the years since Merle Haggard's passing, his influence on American music has only grown. Artists from across the spectrum, from mainstream country stars like Miranda Lambert and Sturgill Simpson, to alternative rockers and Americana performers, cite him as a primary influence. His uncompromising authenticity has become a touchstone in an era of manufactured pop country. For the Haggard family, navigating life without their patriarch has been a journey of reconciliation and rediscovery. According to Teresa, who has largely managed Merle's estate and musical legacy, the years immediately following his death were challenging. There were business decisions to make, legal matters to settle, she explained. But the hardest part was just waking up every day in a world without Merle in it. The siblings, once somewhat estranged due to the complications of Merle's multiple marriages and long absences during their childhoods, have found new connections through preserving their father's legacy. "We might not have chosen each other as friends," Kelly admitted with a wry smile, "but we're family. And Dad's memory keeps bringing us back together." Ben Haggard has perhaps faced the most direct comparison to his famous father. A gifted guitarist who performed in Merle's band The Strangers for years, Ben has continued to perform his father's music while developing his own voice as an artist. "There's no escaping the comparison," Ben acknowledged, "but Dad gave me permission to be my own man, my own musician. That was his final gift to me." The family has been selective about posthumous releases of Merle's music, honoring his wishes about which recordings should remain private. In 2017, they approved the release of Kern River Blues, a song Merle recorded shortly before his death that addressed the California water wars that affected his childhood region. More recently, a limited collection of previously unreleased material was made available to fans, with proceeds supporting charities Merle had championed during his life. What remains most striking in speaking with the Haggard family today is not their grief, though that remains, but their pride. Dad lived exactly the life he wanted to live. Marty Haggard reflected. Not many people can say that. He broke rules, made mistakes, created beauty, and never pretended to be anything but exactly who he was. Teresa, who has perhaps struggled most visibly with the loss, finds comfort in unexpected moments. "Sometimes I'll be in the grocery store and hear his voice come over the speakers singing, 'Today I started loving you again,' or 'Silver Wings,' and it's like he's right there," she said. His physical presence is gone, but his voice, that voice, it's immortal. The ranch in Northern California, where Merle spent his final days, remains in the family, though Teresa now splits her time between there and a smaller home closer to her grandchildren. The property includes Merle's recording studio, left largely untouched since his passing. "Sometimes I go in there and just sit," Ben said. "It still smells like him, cigarettes and coffee, and that cologne he always wore. In that room, time stands still. For country music fans worldwide, Merle Haggard represents the end of an era, one of the last links to country music's golden age, when the genre was defined by authentic storytelling rather than commercial considerations. His contemporaries continue to age, with Willie Nelson now in his 90s, and few artists of their stature and integrity remain. Today, as his family finally shares the private moments of Merle Haggard's final chapter, what emerges is a portrait of a man who faced death as he faced life, on his own terms, with clear eyes, and surrounded by the complicated, imperfect family he had built across his 79 years. When we began this story, we asked how Merle Haggard spent his final moments. What truths remained hidden behind the headlines, and what the man himself wanted us to remember. The answers, as revealed by his family, speak to a life lived authentically until the very end. Those final days weren't marked by regret or fear, but by clarity, purpose, and even creativity. The man who had transformed his troubled life into art, continued creating until he simply couldn't anymore. The family rifts that had defined much of his personal life began healing in those last precious hours, as Merle found the words that had sometimes eluded him in healthier years. Perhaps most tellingly, Merle Haggard died on his birthday, coming full circle in a life that had contained multitudes. He always said that's how he wanted it, Teresa reflected. Born and died on the same day. Poetic, just like him. As his song Footlights prophetically stated decades earlier, I live the kind of life most men only dream of. I make my living writing songs and singing them. Until the very end, that's exactly what he did. What's your favorite memory or song of Merle Haggard? Share in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories of music legends. The Hag may be gone, but his music, and now these intimate family revelations, ensure his story will never be forgotten.